His reaction being standing up and pumping his fist into the air, that makes him a strong leader in your eyes. Like, I'm going to need you all to put the comic.
See this, what she just said right here, dude. It was his reaction after shows a strong leader, and this woman just dismantled it, as she absolutely should, because again, Maga and the Trump supporters, what they do is they take performative nonsense and they try to make it a sign of patriotism or strength. Like him raising his fist and yelling, fight, fight, fight in front of a camera, it means he's strong. But no, he's not strong. That's performative nonsense. The same with the national anthem. Taking your hat off and saluting or putting your hand over your heart and standing up to a song is not patriotic. You know what is patriotic? Risking your entire fucking career to take a knee during that song to bring eyes to a really important social issue that affects your people, and taking that fight to make the world better. That's real patriotism. Standing and putting your hand over a heart during a song after you're 6 beers in and you're just doing it to play the role of a patriot ain't patriotism. Strength ain't grabbing the fucking weird handshake. That's not strength. That's being a goddamn weirdo. Real strength is standing in front of that trans woman and saying, hey, quit fucking attacking her. Let's get to know her and figure this shit out. It's truth.
Down. Like, this is real life. The reason that so many people find this to be a staged event is honestly because he did that. Because what person with any sort of survival instinct and common sense would stand up when there are bullets flying? Like,
yeah, absolutely. Like standing up like that. Even those agents letting him stand up afterwards made it seem like it was fake. Because a real, normal human being that gets shot at doesn't do that. Only a goddamn moron would fucking do that. Not a strong person.
Little children know better to get down and not to stand up like that.
I genuinely thought that most of the world was for, not the world, most of America was for Kamala. I really thought that.
Me too.
Not being facetious in any way, I genuinely was like riding that blue wave and felt like we were really unified in that.
I will say this though. I believed that many people were for Kamala, but what I believed is a little different. Is I believed that more people would show up. Like I knew there was a threat with what Charlie Kirk was doing, which was taking low propensity voters, young 19, 20-year-old white men that never vote because they don't have to, because they're the most privileged class out there. And he was getting them to vote. He was going to fraternities and just getting white man after white man after white men, young white men who were being radicalized by Logan Paul and Andrew Tate, getting them to vote for Trump. So there was a threat of Trump getting more votes than he normally would. Now, I personally thought more Republicans would peel off and vote for Kamala because of the Liz Cheney, the moderation, the moving in the middle. But I think what happened is the people that might have peeled off for a white guy weren't going to peel off for a black woman. And that was my fear from the very beginning with Kamala, is that I knew I would vote for Kamala, but I knew that most of like small town Wisconsin that I grew up in, you know, in the 80s, those people weren't going to vote for Kamala. No matter how much better she was than Trump, they could have run Kyle Rittenhouse against Kamala Harris, and a lot of those white moderates in the Midwest would have voted for fucking Kyle Rittenhouse simply because he wasn't a black woman. And I had a little too much faith that maybe that was going to be different. And I'll be honest, guys. Okay, I will be honest. I believe it's going to be harder to elect a black president again after Obama, because Obama was used as like the generator of racism. The Republican Party, the right wing, and all of their media has actively tried to make it seem like racism wasn't even a problem until Obama, guys. They're trying to make it seem like black people in power cause racism. And I think even though Obama was this watershed moment, I think it's going to be harder to elect a black president from here on out, because I think that they have demonized the black person in power with their DEI attacks on pilots, the DEI mayor, the DEI, the fucking CRT. They've tried to make it seem like racism has been caused by black people being in power. And that sucks, dude. And that's why, look at Trump's cabinet. There's no fucking black people in it, of course. Except what? The urban, right? Same fucking shit, bro. And dude, I wanted her to win too, but there was definitely sexist vibes. She was definitely getting the whole, she's not being pinpoint enough. She's not honest. She's lying to us. She's not being forthcoming. She's too robotic. This, that. They had a whole fucking scale of things she had to, she had 50 boxes she had to check every time she opened her mouth. And Donald Trump could show up and ramble about fucking jerking off to Hannibal Lecter and eating his own feces, and they're just like, oh yeah, he's making an astute observation about the human body and how it relates to personal politics. And then he was like filleting the mic and shit, making the whole she slept her way to the top. This is coming from a fucking serial adultering piece of shit with the 2-inch fucking pee-pee. He's talking shit about Kamala's sexuality. This is what Trump tweeted earlier today. He tweeted, "We just won a historic landslide and mandate from the American people, but Senate Democrats are organizing to improperly stall and delay the confirmation process of many of our great nominees, like all those sex predators, like, the child sex trafficker Matt Gaetz, or the rapist Pete Hegseth, or Kash Patel, the Looney Tunes. They will try all sorts of tricks starting very soon. Republicans must not allow them to do that. We have a country to run and many big problems to solve, mostly created by Democrats." Okay, Trumpy, jerk off. Republicans, be smart and tough. But right here, we won a historic landslide and mandate, but they won by 1.4%. And Trump did not even win a majority of the votes. He didn't win a majority. He won 49%. Kamala Harris and the third-party candidates, more people voted not for Trump than for Trump. And he eked out a 1.4%. So not only does he not have a historic landslide, he doesn't even have a non-historic landslide. He doesn't even have a tiny landslide. He doesn't even have a convincing victory. And he certainly doesn't have a mandate. But now where it gets really funny about this is, look at this. I've seen a lot of these opinions here where they say Kamala was obviously a bad candidate. He says she was generationally wretched. Now, you will see this all over right-wing Twitter about Kamala being a bad candidate. It says she was the harm reduction candidate, ran a terrible campaign. Kamala was probably the weakest presidential candidate I've ever seen. This is all over the place. People keep saying that Kamala was a bad candidate, especially amongst right-wing voices. This guy's saying worst candidate in history, Colin Rugg. But here's what's interesting, guys. Follow me on this. Trump is saying he's got a historic landslide and mandate. Colin Rugg says Kamala Harris was the worst candidate in history. And this is something hugely echoed by the right wing. But you ready? Here's what we should be talking about, guys. The real story should be how shitty the Republican Party and Trumpism are. Because they're saying that Kamala was the worst candidate in history. They're saying that Kamala Harris was generationally wretched. But that means the Republican Party and Donald Trump, this supposed mandate, they only won by 1.4%. Like, dude, if she really is the worst candidate in history, that means Donald Trump and the Republican Party are truly terrible because they barely won against the worst candidate in history, according to them. They say she was generationally wretched, but they barely squeaked a win. So either A, Kamala Harris was a formidable opponent, and she was actually a really strong candidate with a strong platform, or B, the Republican Party and Trumpism is not even that strong. Not even that popular. They didn't even get the majority of votes. More people voted not Trump than Trump, and he barely beat supposedly the worst candidate in history. He only beat her by 1.4%, which means that if the Democrats run an even remotely good candidate, they will easily wipe the floor with the next Maga. You know what I mean? That's it. That's the story that no one's talking about. They're having a talk show talking about how the Dems' messaging is bad, and the Dems lost the middle class, and the Dems lost the touch with the worker. But did they really? Because y'all are saying we had a terrible candidate who ran a terrible campaign, who had no policies, and she wasn't effective, and those dumb motherfuckers barely won. So, I mean, I think the story is that Maga is in deep shit. They barely eked out a victory against a candidate that only had 100 days to campaign. I mean, realistically, how good was her campaign going to be? In 100 days? The problem that we're currently encountering is this. Donald Trump ran a campaign about concentration camps for people that are very important assets of our economy. Every state in America requires undocumented immigrant labor. We cannot live without it. Our food systems, our agriculture, our construction systems would fucking collapse without undocumented immigrant labor. And we have had a problem with massive amounts of immigration after the pandemic. But instead of passing the legislation, the Republicans sunk the legislation and they voted for concentration camps and hit squads. And that is unforgivable. That is not an opinion. That is human rights violations. That is like trying to take us back to enslavement or segregation. So you're not getting off the hook for that. You are going to get bitch slapped and kicked in the nuts for the rest of your days for choosing concentration camps, as you should. And another part of their platform is to dehumanize and personally attack the existence of transgender individuals. And there's like 3 or 4 million trans people in America. You know, 8 times the size of Wyoming amount of trans people live in this country. And they're trying to dehumanize them and eradicate them. So it's not even about like opinions. You don't get to take people that exist and have an opinion about them not being able to exist. That's not an opinion. That is bigotry and large scale harm. That is really some neo-Nazi shit. And unfortunately, 77 million Americans decided that they were okay with that. They're okay with ethnic cleansing and or eradicating people that they're scared of or that they don't quite understand. And so it's not about opinions. It is about actual harmful, you know, like post-slavery, heading back towards segregation rhetoric coming from these far-right extremists. And you are going to get fought for that. And if you voted for that, you got to understand that, like, yeah, you're going to get your ass kicked about it. And again, he's a sexual abuser, an adjudicated sexual abuser. And so human rights are non-negotiable. Like, do you have a right to do something about immigration? For sure. Let's get together, Republicans and Democrats. We had a bill, but they sank the bill. Trump forced the Republicans to sink their own bill. You want to pass some legislation to help with immigration? Yes. But you want to tread on human beings' civil rights by rounding them up in concentration camps? No. That's a human rights violation. Like, I'm sorry. Human rights violations, you voted for it, so now you're going to suffer the choice of having chosen human rights violations. And I don't care if we lose more elections and the right gets more abusive and more controlling and eventually it breaks out in a civil war and we have to bitch slap them like we did in 1860. I don't fucking care, bro. I don't want it to go to that, but if we have to go back and force the Confederate motherfuckers to wave the white flags again, we will. You want to try and Christian nationalist this country and take us back to the 1800s? We'll beat your asses again. Okay? I'm not worried about it. Hopefully it doesn't come to that and you guys come to your senses through this Trumpist shit. But if you're going to keep stomping on human rights, there will be a revolution. It will be a violent one. And most certainly the side of the people that aren't abusing human rights are going to win, because that's what America's about. The Confederacy did not win. And you're not going to win this time either. This is 2025, baby. Dude, shit's going to get crazy. And yes, it's going to be a year of premium content, guys. The YouTube channel is popping off. We're growing. We're building an insane community. I got to say to all the YouTube members, thank you so much. Every day, the YouTube membership is growing, and you guys are incredible. Seriously, thank you so much. Like, we are building an amazing community on YouTube here, and it's awesome. The boots are on. The fucking muscles are pumped, and the resistance is happening. And now nothing's going to stop us. Like, once I get that core conviction going, we are now unstoppable. And I couldn't have done it without you guys. Like, I need you to understand that you guys, you got me through a very rough patch. And now I'm going to try to return the favor for the next 4 years. We're going to get through the Trump years and whatever comes next. And we're going to do it. We're going to do it with humor, and we're going to do it with style, and we're going to do it with some aggressive clapping back at those Maga motherfuckers and slapping the out of them. You know, the digital slap. That being said, Happy New Year, motherfuckers! I'll see you tomorrow. I will see you next year.